Good afternoon. Welcome to Business 360, your complete view of the stories driving business, markets, and the economy. I'm Apa Ongpin, and this is the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Global oil prices slide back to around $90 per barrel, while the dollar gives up ground after U.S. President Donald Trump hinted a deal with Iran may be close. Here at home, concerns persist over a weak peso and stock market. Where should investors go from here? Atram Group Chief Investment Strategist Phillip Hagedorn joins us. Executive Secretary Ralph Recto and other officials face new plunder and technical malversation complaints for allegedly diverting PhilHealth funds to the Treasury. And car sales slowed down in April, even with demand for electric vehicles accelerating. The trading week begins with global markets betting on two powerful themes: a possible peace deal in the Middle East and a fresh wave of tech-driven optimism rolling through Wall Street, Asia, and beyond. Business and markets reporter Sachiko Gamboa gives us the analysis. Sachiko, all yours.
Hi, Apa. Here are some of the stories moving the markets. On Wall Street, quantum is becoming the next tech trade to watch. Last week, the Trump administration announced a $2 billion grant program for quantum computing firms, and traders moved fast. IBM shares rose as much as 16%, while global foundries jumped 21%. The move shows Wall Street is still looking for the next big tech trade after artificial intelligence. And this time, the money is moving into hardware, chips, and government-backed innovation. That risk appetite is being tested by SpaceX. After its prospectus filing last week, SpaceX is targeting $80 billion or more, with a post-IPO value estimated at $1.5 trillion. Critics say the timing is risky given the political uncertainty and the size of the valuation. But beyond SpaceX, there are two names that could test just how hot the market really is: OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, and Anthropic, the one behind Claude. If they move closer to listing, 2026 could go down as one of the biggest IPO years on record. And here at home, ASEN and SM Investments are powering up the push to renewable energy. ASEN disclosed last week that it will switch nearly 1,500 7-Eleven stores to 100% renewable energy through an electricity supply agreement, while SM Investments increased its renewable energy sourcing to 31% of total electricity consumption in 2025 from 27% the year before. And the big question now, will other companies follow? With high fuel prices and energy costs, renewable power is becoming a more practical business decision. Even households are looking at solar to cut down monthly expenses. And finally, construction company EEI Corporation is also on watch. EEI shares dropped 5.71% in 24 hours last Friday, despite reporting a year-on-year increase in net income for the first quarter. The catch? That disclosure does not yet reflect EEI's April 2026 announcement suspending construction projects due to the ongoing war and rising material costs. That means investors may be looking past the first quarter gain and pricing in tougher months ahead, watching whether project delays and higher input costs start showing up in the second quarter numbers. So this week, markets are watching the next big tech bet, a possible blockbuster IPO season, and whether energy costs start pushing more Philippine companies toward renewable power.
Thank you, Sachiko. How did the Philippine Stock Exchange Index perform today?
Actually, quite well. The PSEI inched to return to the 6,000 level. Asian stocks are also trading higher, with Japan's Nikkei 225 hitting a record 65,000 level. Investors are pricing in hopes that the US and Iran are close to finally reaching a deal. Though U.S. President Donald Trump clarified he is not rushing and said that the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz will stay in force until an agreement is signed. Still, that was enough to lift the market sentiment. The dollar slipped as risk appetite returned across global markets. While oil prices fell to their lowest in 2 weeks, with the benchmark Brent crude trading around $90 to the barrel now, but the full reaction is yet to still come. With Wall Street and London Stock Exchange closed for the holiday on Monday.
And that was our business and markets reporter, Sachiko Gamboa. Coming up, we get an in-depth market read with the Atram Group Chief Investment Strategist, Phillip Hagedorn. Next, this is Business 360. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Apa Ongpin. The peso could continue to move sideways versus the dollar this week as the Middle East conflict remains uncertain. We get the market read of Phillip Hagedorn, Chief Investment Strategist of Atram Group. Welcome to Business 360, Phillip. By the way, we're friends in real life, so.
Thank you for having us again, Apa, and thank you. I think it's the first time I get the honor of being interviewed by you today.
Thanks. Phil, Wall Street is chasing quantum, AI, SpaceX, and these mega tech IPO stories, while the PSEI is still trying to find its footing, struggling back to 6,000. Why the disconnect?
Well, it's, that's a long story, I think, but kind of started, well, I think our market, has, since COVID, lost a lot of foreign investors.
Yes.
And they haven't come back. They have chosen to stay away from this market, not just the Philippines, but other Southeast Asian markets as well. And actually, we started to see some inflow in the beginning of this year, some normalization. There was $400 million in net inflows in the first 2 months. And that just reversed after the attack. No? So Philippines has always been a country very prone to energy spikes, and investors know that. So when that hit, the reversal came. So it was like what we like to call in Atram the interruption to normalcy, right? We were kind of getting back to normal, inflation under control, interest rates heading down, peso quite stable, and then this hit, right?
Yeah.
And it's the interruption.
Is this really about weak fundamentals in the Philippines, or is it more about confidence? Investors simply not happy about Philippine risk right now?
Well, it's a great question because I think it's, first of all, our fundamentals are actually quite decent, right?
Yeah.
When you look at, prior to this event, right, if you look at the reserves we had, where the macro numbers we're looking at, where growth was like projected to be 5.8%. So we're kind of getting back to our groove, right? And this interruption kind of shows our weaknesses, right? It shows where we're vulnerable, where we need to think long-term about how to address these type of problems moving forward, so that we don't see this massive impact. I mean, it's been incredible. In just 3 months, we've had inflation go from under control to 6%.
Yeah.
We've had the peso go from 58, very steady, to all-time high. And there's nothing else out there except for this crisis at the moment. And Hopefully, the price of oil today is giving us a sign that this is maybe
Yeah.
coming to an end.
Less
So
than $100.
we've been 3 months in the situation. I don't think that's going to cause a lot of scarring if it's just 3 months. So we can get back on track and maybe by the fourth quarter of this year start to get back to that thought of normalcy. But right now it's about the weakening peso. Will the BSP raise rates again? Those are the questions on the table, diba?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you're optimistic about it. Does the Philippine market have
We have a lot of work to do.
Does the Philippine market have a future trade of its own, or are we still mostly asking investors to buy, banking, conglomerates, property, dividends?
I'm really glad you asked that question because the PSEI, the physics, the index today, is not anymore a banking, property, and holding company index. So if you look into the index today, well, that was post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we were like 20% banking, 20% property, 40%, 45% holding companies that relied on the earnings of the properties and the banks. And then it was 20% everything else. Today, that everything else, services and industrials, make up 44% of the index. And not only that, they make up a better earnings growth profile. ICTSI, the number one stock in the index today, 26% of the index, has an earnings growth expectation for this year of 22%.
Wow, fantastic.
And that's for 26% of the index, right? Versus the properties, which at this point, if we break even on property companies this year, is going to be good. Holding companies, you forecasting about 8, it's probably going to be closer to 6, 7. And then the banks, that's going to probably still grow at high single digits. So the profile for me has a lot more growth today in the index than it had, compared to what it looked like prior to COVID. So it's different.
Okay. Can the Pax Silica Alliance help give us a local AI story, or do investors still need to see more proof before getting excited?
I think what would be much more exciting short term is a GCash IPO.
Okay.
That's our tech.
Yeah.
And that would be way more. I mean, Pax Silica, it seems like a bit of a dream at the moment, but if it starts to happen and materialize, and there's a lot of infrastructure and building that needs to happen before any activity starts, but a GCash IPO can happen soon.
Yeah.
And that's something that would really, I think, boost the market.
Yeah. Is the PSEI losing a whole generation of investors to crypto, US tech, and offshore trading platforms?
I wouldn't say they're losing them, but the PSEI is not the only game in town anymore.
Yeah.
I think in our early years of work, we had no choice. We could not buy, unless you had an account in Singapore or Hong Kong, you couldn't do foreign stocks, you couldn't do foreign funds, you couldn't do crypto, you couldn't do this stuff. And today, because of the BSP being the open regulator that they are, world class by that as well, we have all of these products available. And the PSEI now has competition. There's competition from global feeder funds that are selling very well and doing very well. There's competition from Bitcoin. But the beauty is that there's a huge new population of investors, young people that are working and that are looking to make investments. So that's the opportunity that we really have. We just have to give them the best ideas are on the ground here,
Yeah. What would make foreign funds, foreign direct investors look at Philippine equities seriously again? I mean,
Well, I don't think it's anything different from when they, Philippines has always been it's never like the first market they buy. When it comes to, let's put money from Asia. Okay, Japan, Korea. By the time they get to the Philippines, it's 4% of the portfolio, 3% of the portfolio. And that's still where we are, right?
Yeah.
We're in line with the rest of Southeast Asia. And the same things that attracted investors before will attract them again. Growth, good valuation today, but most importantly, that growth potential because of the low valuation and our economy that, is actually growing quite well considering the factors that we're dealing with. And if these things sort themselves out, back to 5% growth, even at 5, that's among the world's highest growth rates. So that'd be something maybe by the second half of this year, people start thinking about next year, and that might be the scenario we're looking at.
Yeah, of course, that 5% needs to be fueled by government spending, on the suspended infrastructure
This is the
projects.
time where it's needed most because the economy is kind of, the problem was that we did not expect that to happen in a big way in the first half of this year because of our issues of last year. What we wanted is for that to really boost the second half of the year.
Yes.
I don't know if, because of the situation, the government can actually move quicker to start the spending program earlier or not, but there are signs that spending has started to pick up from the government side. So we'll see if that can continue.
Well, it's in the budget. All they have to do is disperse it, right?
Well, disperse it and make sure it goes to where it's supposed to go and
that's
build what it's supposed to build.
Let's talk a little bit about the peso. When the BSP governor says a move to 63 pesos and 50 centavos against the dollar could be okay if it happens gradually, how do you hear that in the markets?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the BSP governor is a world-class governor.
Yeah.
And the BSP itself as an institution has been, awarded many times, for me, the shining light of governance in the country in terms of an institution. And I don't know what drove the governor to make that comment, but the problem with these markets nowadays is volatility is so high that you can get spikes like that and it causes fear. And I think he's trying to say, we may see that, we may not, but that shouldn't be anything to worry about.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see it at that level. I don't think anybody does, right? But I think it's the fear that this problem in the Middle East continues and continues and continues. And if it does, if it's here in 6 months, then we'll be talking about that.
Yeah.
That will be real. The good news is that he said that before the news of this weekend, which seems like 60-day ceasefire, oil price down at 92. My question to him would be now, that extra hike you were thinking, baka di na, di ba?
Yeah.
Maybe we can avoid that extra hike because since hiking, we've seen what's happened to property companies. So that to me is probably a more relevant question for the short term. Is that second hike in the cards, or are we now more likely to just pause?
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's going to be predictable because that's what central governments need to be. Central banks need to be.
He's been pretty good about that telegraphing kind of where we're headed, and so I have full faith and confidence in the governor. I think we have a steady hand on the tiller, as they say, and
despite the recent criticism of an anonymous cabinet official.
Well, let the executive worry about their problems.
Yeah. At Atram, are you already positioning clients for 63 or even 65 pesos to the dollar? Or do you think the BSP will be able to prevent that?
Well, it's really not about that. I think it's more really about diversification, right?
Because
at Atram, we were the first to introduce the feeder funds in the country. So our mantra has always been to diversify, but not to forget the Philippines.
Yes.
To make sure Philippines, your salaries in the Philippine peso, your expenses are in pesos. Just because the U.S. market's doing great doesn't mean you should be zero here.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if things start to roll out the way they're happening today, 22 times multiple in the U.S. versus 9 times in Manila, I think there's a lot more value, at least, in our market. So being diversified, having global product and local product in one portfolio is how investors should be positioning moving forward.
So if you're an ordinary investor, you're not a big, how should you be thinking about this at this time? Should you be hedging? Should you be holding more dollars, or just staying put and see how this
again,
plays
it's balance, right? To me, it's about having So the Philippine peso today, the best idea for Philippine peso is fixed income because your 5-year is giving you 7%. So an actively managed medium-term bond fund is positioned to make decent money in the next 12 months, especially if rates come down over the next 12 months. So, if you don't want to take too much risk, fixed income is a simple way to play that. Now, if you're a bit more risky and you want to buy the stock market at 9 times at 6,000, where prior to the attack, the houses were talking about 7,000 as our target. Today it's kind of half, but everyone can change their mind pretty easily if oil price is at 85 next month.
Sure.
We'll be at, so there's opportunity in that space. At the same time, U.S. markets at 22 times, it's a little pricey. It's asking for much. So you diversify. Today, the best performing global markets are in Asia. Nikkei, Korea, those are the best performing. So, and they're done super well for 4 months. I think Japan's up 33%. I think, what is it? The S&P is up 14, and that's for 4 months of the year only. So you're asking for a lot if you get in now there and forget about the 9 times PSEI and the 7% interest rates that are available here in the 5-year, right? So,
Atram has been a very vocal advocate for stronger governance at the PSE, including the broker director term limits that the SEC just finalized last week. Are you satisfied with how the PSE has responded?
I think I think 10 years is what they've said now, right? So that seems to be a good number, and we gotta, first acknowledge the work that all of those folks have done to get us where we are. I know the exchange is not right now in its shiniest moment, but it's had a fantastic growth rate. Our, systems are very good. Our surveillance is good. Our, compliance and disclosures are working how they should. So I think, moving on, hopefully that's what we want to see. More listings, more small companies using the exchange to raise money. That's what we look forward to, I think, moving forward.
Okay. Final question. If you had fresh money to deploy in Philippine equities today, where would you put it apart from fixed return equities?
Well, I mean, I'm going to plug a couple of funds that we have. I mean, I think, again, Philippine stock market, if you buy beta, meaning you buy the index, you know exactly what you're buying. 26% ICTSI, 12% property company, so it's very clear. And that hasn't worked. In the last 5 years, returns have been negative. I think now it's poised to do well, but those that have picked individual stocks have done very well in this country. So, for example, the mining sector, which is now growing, it's growing fast. The earnings are growing fast on companies, are not really represented in the PSEI, but they're represented in what they call the small mid-cap index of the PSEI. Guess how high that was? Up. That was up 65% in 2 years versus the PSEI, which was down 8%.
Wow.
So there are stocks that can make you a lot of money in the market. You just have to do homework, right? Or hire us and we can help show you the way. But, I mean, there are opportunities. So you have to balance it out because, first of all, it's risky. Philippine market is volatile. So balance that out with some fixed income, and I think your return should be pretty decent, moving forward.
That's great. Thank you for joining us, Phillip Hagedorn of Atram. More stories when we return. Business 360 will be right back. Thank you.
Surprise pa rin kay Senator Bato. Wala siyang balak sumuko.
Paligyan, tulad ng ginawa nila kay dating Kamulong Duterte.
Sa Kamara, impeach na naman si VP Sara.
Proseso at ebidensya.
Sana kapag ito ay napunta na rin sa Senado, maging patas ang mga senador natin.
Natabunan na ba ang krisis sa langis ng tensyon sa politika?
Sa bawat issue may anggulo. At ang balita,
Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Apa Ongpin. Health advocate Dr. Tony Leachon filed plunder complaints against Executive Secretary Ralph Recto and other cabinet officials. Joan Manalo is on the line for more details.
APA Executive Secretary Ralph Recto is once again facing new complaints before the Office of the Ombudsman in connection with the transfer of 60 billion pesos in PhilHealth reserve funds to the National Treasury when he was still the Secretary of the Department of Finance. At around 11 o'clock this morning, public health advocate Dr. Tony Leachon filed plunder, technical malversation, and graft complaints against Recto, arguing that the transfer of PhilHealth reserve funds violated the Universal Health Care Act and that the money should have been used for the public's healthcare needs.
After the December 5 decision of the Supreme Court, they should have actually returned the money from the Treasury to PhilHealth. Okay. And they should not have waited for the 2026 budget and charged that to the taxpayers' money. So ang tawag doon, double jeopardy. Ang daming pera ng Treasury, soli nila from the Treasury to the PhilHealth. Inintay yan, kinarga yan sa budget ng 2026. So, ibig sabihin, walang binayaran. Naisahan tayo ng 2 beses.
Leachon said the funds taken from PhilHealth were protected health funds intended for Filipinos and added that the 60 billion peso transfer exceeded the 50 million peso threshold required under the anti-plunder law. He then said Recto should therefore be held accountable.
Kasi nung 60 billion, hindi nagamit siya na maraming pasyente nagka-heart attack, nagka-cancer, na-stroke, yung mga nagda-dialysis, yung mga unpaid hospital claims. Diba? So, ganun na lang ba yun? Sorry nagkamali kami. Paano naman yung pera? Ang hirap ng buhay ngayon. At sa lahat ng pwede nating, sorry for the word, nakawan, ba't kalusugan ng tao? Hindi yun eh. It's a basic Filipino right.
Leachon also filed administrative complaints against Recto for grave misconduct, gross neglect of duty, and conduct prejudicial to the best interest of the service, as he called on the Ombudsman to immediately investigate the case and hold Recto accountable. However, Recto quickly fired back at the new complaints, calling them nothing but a nuisance and a harassment case that should already be dismissed. Recto maintained that the transfer was legal, saying that it was mandated by Congress under the General Appropriations Act of 2024. The Executive Secretary also said the Supreme Court itself already stated that he has no criminal liability since he only implemented the law in good faith. Recto further claimed that Leachon was only using the issue to seek a position in the next administration. And Recto also said that the 60 billion peso excess fund has already been returned to PhilHealth, a claim earlier confirmed by the state health insurance provider. Back to you, Apa.
Thank you, Joan Manalo, for that report. Well, the Makati Business Club has some strong words. The, quote, unprecedented drama and chaos in the Senate has damaged the credibility of the institution. The Makati Business Club reminded senators that they were elected to serve and not pursue personal, political, or business interests. The MBC adds that they should remain guided by the Constitution. They also noted the Senate President should serve as a moral compass and must be independent so not to erode public confidence in the institution. Senator Risa Ontiveros admits the opposition still lacks the numbers to form a majority. But in an interview with BNC, she said she is open to supporting Senator Win Gatchalian should a change in Senate leadership push through.
May ugong-ugong na naman na may kuna naman sa Senate.
Oh,
Sino ang gusto mapupusuan nyo? Cheese, Migs, or Win?
Well, yung last two ay kasama ko sa minority. So masaya ako na sa kasalukuyang minority, solid kami, 11 na may mga pwedeng magsilbi. Kung si Migs has already served as our Senate President, so proven yung kakayahan niya. Kung si Sherwin yon, he's always been a serious legislator. Magka-batch kami, so isang dekada ko na siyang naoobserbahan. Laging nasa floor, kung magsususpend, hindi kaagad papasok sa lounge para kumain. Laging kausap yung staff niya tungkol sa trabaho. So, in addition to Migs na napatunayan na ang sarili bilang SP, Sherwin, I believe, would make an SP.
Sherwin, si Win.
May boto ba? May boto na ba kayo?
Wala pa. Tulad nung nangyari kay dating SP Tito noon, we would need a simple majority.
Ontiveros also says she is preparing for the possibility of running for president in 2028. But she notes there must only be one candidate from the opposition. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has appointed former Senator Francis Tolentino as acting Secretary of the Department of Labor and Employment. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said Tolentino will take over from Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma, who is stepping down due to health reasons.
Tiwala si Pangulong Marcos Jr. na mapamumunuan ni incoming acting Secretary Tolentino Andole dahil sa kanyang kakayahan at malawak na karanasan sa paghawak ng mahalagang tungkulin sa pamahalaan lokal o nasyonal.
President Marcos will travel to Tokyo tomorrow for a state visit to Japan from May 27 to 29. The visit is expected to strengthen cooperation in defense, security, economy, and human resources. At the top of the agenda is the implementation of the Reciprocal Access Agreement. It's a landmark defense pact that allows Philippine and Japanese troops to enter each other's territory for joint exercises. The president will also sit with the Japanese business circle, although no specific pledges have been divulged to the press. After talks, he will meet Filipino workers in Japan. More stories when we return. Business 360, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Apa Ongpin. It was a rough road for the car industry in April. Sales slowed down even with increasing demand for electric vehicles. Gia Baroga has that story.
Electrified vehicles may be gaining speed, but they were not enough to lift the local car scene out of a slow lane in April. Total car sales hit nearly 133,000 units year-to-date, down 12% from the same period last year. That's according to the latest data from the Chamber of Automotive Manufacturers of the Philippines, Inc. or CAMPI, and the Truck Manufacturers Association. Most vehicle categories were all in the red, including main segments, passenger cars, and commercial vehicles. The only category that saw even a small gain was light-duty trucks and buses, up by just 1%. CAMPI President Jing Atienza says the industry is still recovering from last year's slowdown, with high fuel costs also making buyers think twice before buying a vehicle. Meanwhile, the electrified vehicle segment continues to pick up momentum. Sales surged to more than 17,000 units, a massive 159% jump from the 6,800 sold during the same period last year. Hybrid vehicles continue to drive demand, making up the bulk of sales with over 12,000 units sold. Battery electrics and plug-in hybrids followed with around 2,700 and 2,500 units respectively. Atienza says more consumers are now turning to energy-efficient vehicles, looking for more practical and fuel-saving options amid high oil prices. And despite an 8% drop in sales, Toyota of the Bilyonaryo T family still holds the biggest share of the local market. Mitsubishi, Suzuki, Nissan, and Ford complete the top 5, though all recorded lower sales year-on-year. Campi may have eased up on its 500,000 sales target for the year, but it remains optimistic as it gears up for the 10th Philippine International Motor Show, featuring over 150 vehicles from 17 of its member brands. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
Permitting delays are slowing the rollout of EV charging stations in the Philippines. A director of the Department of Energy says approvals can take more than 6 months, even for government-donated chargers. The DOE is supposed to deploy charging stations to local governments, but installations being held up by red tape. A new joint order is now being prepared to speed up permitting and support faster EV infrastructure development. A minority shareholder of First Gen Corporation is threatening legal action over the company's deals with Enrique Razon Jr.'s Prime Infrastructure Capital. Shareholder Joseph Alvin Tan has given First Gen a 10-day deadline to turn over documents related to, quote, key man and, quote, change of control provisions in the agreements. Tan said these clauses could act as, quote, poison pill mechanisms, triggering heavy penalties or steep valuation discounts if First Gen Chief Executive Federico Piqui Lopez leaves the company or is removed. He estimates the potential exposure at up to 24 billion pesos. The Philippine Competition Commission has reopened its investigation into Villar-owned Camellia Homes over alleged restrictions on rival internet providers in a subdivision in Cavite. The case, first filed in 2021, was revived after the Commission rejected a 2022 settlement proposal from Camellia. The PCC resumed its probe in March. Residents of Cerritos Heights in Bacoor, Cavite alleged they were blocked from subscribing to Globe Telecom's fiber internet service during the pandemic when demand for remote work productivity or connectivity surged. The Villar Group, which also owns internet provider StreamTech, has yet to respond to requests for comment. Philinvest Land Incorporated is reporting stronger demand for ready for occupancy units. The company said it saw a decline in unsold residential inventory by 4.1 billion pesos. The data gives a snapshot of demand for move-in ready units in the property market. The father of Japan's convenience stores has died at the age of 93 from heart failure. Toshifumi Suzuki helped launch 7-Eleven in Japan in 1973 through a partnership with its US-based operator. He pioneered data-driven inventory systems and popularized ready-to-eat meals that shaped Japan's convenience store model. He also led the turnaround of the US 7-Eleven business after its parent company fell into bankruptcy in the early 90s. China successfully sends its manned spaceship into orbit. The Shenzhou 23 spacecraft blasted off from northwest China. It carries 3 crew members, which includes Lai Ka-ying, the first astronaut from Hong Kong.
Distinguished superiors and comrades. According to the rocket's flight data and calculations by the Beijing Aerospace Flight Control Center based on monitoring data, the Long March 2 FY-23 carrier rocket has accurately sent the Shenzhou 23-man spacecraft to the predetermined orbit. The spacecraft is functioning normally. I hereby announce the Shenzhou 23-man spacecraft launch mission a complete success.
One of the astronauts will stay in space for a full year, twice as long as previous Shenzhou missions. This is China's 40th human spaceflight and the 7th crewed mission since the Tiangong station began full operations in 2022. And that's Business 360. We'll keep tracking the moves that matter across markets, policy, and the economy. I'm Apa Ongpin. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.